We don't know what rate or changes in rate of autophagy actually has any sort of health or physiological impact. What amount will affect cellular function? What amount will actually affect health? Does 10% have an impact? Does 20%? Does 1%? We may look at a study and see that there was not a statistically significant increase in autophagy. However, that increase may be actually meaningful from a physiological standpoint. That change might actually affect function. That change might actually be physiologically relevant, but not statistically relevant. Similarly, we may look at a paper and see, oh, there was a statistically significant increase in autophagy, but that may not be physiologically meaningful. Statistically might be different, but that difference or that change may not actually mean anything from a physiological, functional, clinical standpoint. That statistically significant increase may not actually mean anything because we don't know what level of autophagy or changes in rates of autophagy actually have an effect on function or on health. Even if autophagy was worth targeting, that you should train and eat trying to increase autophagy, you can't measure it. Like, you can't measure it. I've measured it. It ain't easy. There is no readily available way to measure autophagy via some app or even some laboratory testing. You really just can't go to some wellness or fitness center or holistic medicine thing or your doctor or even a lab and say, measure autophagy in me. And if that were the case, the follow-up question would be, okay, in what tissue? And you don't know. What tissue are you actually talking about? They haven't thought beyond turn on autophagy good. Measurements of autophagy have to come from some tissue. They have to come from some cells, meaning you have to take tissue out of the body. You have to take cells out of the body. If you want to measure autophagy in skeletal muscle, guess what? You got to give up some skeletal muscle. You got to get a biopsy done. That's literally taking a chunk of muscle out of your body.
Good. Okay. So now, next step, tissue, and then you're going to set the gun to the side.
Okay, so this, I'm not going to touch it.
And I could put it in any orientation that you want.
That's
to
great.
center.
Yeah.
And we're already done, so we could actually touch it, right, if we needed to.
If you want autophagy measured in fat cells, well, guess what? Then you got to give up some of your fat cells. They got to go in and take a chunk of fat cells out. If you want autophagy measured in your liver, they got to go take a chunk of your liver. Pancreas, same thing. Brain, same thing. And I will say you can get autophagy measured in some cells from a blood draw. That's something that I've done a lot of. And that's coming from white blood cells. But again, that's not a readily available or commercially available option. So if your goal is to focus on autophagy through exercise or intermittent fasting or calorie restriction, there's no way to even know if that's having any effect. You cannot measure that. You don't have access to a measurement of it. So focusing on autophagy doesn't even make sense because you can't measure it. You don't know what you're doing is actually having an effect on autophagy. And like I said earlier, if there is an effect, we don't even know what those effects mean. So trying to do something to upregulate autophagy, you don't even know if you're upregulating it or not. And this point right here illustrates the irrelevance of focusing on mechanisms in practice, focusing on mechanisms in your training or in your nutrition. You can't measure most of these things. You're not measuring the mechanisms. So for example, when people talk about, say, exercise and mitochondrial biogenesis, you're going to exercise and that's going to cause mitochondrial biogenesis, making more mitochondria, good functioning mitochondria. These things have to be done in a lab with specialized equipment and supplies. So targeting mitochondrial biogenesis with your exercise doesn't make any sense because you're not going to be able to measure, did you make more mitochondria? There is no app or scan that will tell you you made 5 more mitochondria. Instead, you should focus your training on the actual outcome that you are trying to achieve. So if you're interested in increasing your, say, aerobic fitness, then you can, go have your VO2 max tested and see whether or not did you get more aerobically fit. And guess what? If your VO2 max increased, chances are that you made more mitochondria. You did have more mitochondrial biogenesis. That increase in VO2 max would highly suggest that you have more mitochondria in that muscle. Or even easier, and because not everyone has access to getting a VO2 max test done, that costs money, can you just run for a longer period of time without getting tired? Can you run harder for a longer period of time? Can you bike or swim or whatever your training is? Can you do that for a longer period of time, or do that at a greater intensity for a longer period of time? And if the answer is yes, then guess what? You probably made more mitochondria. So if you're someone that wants to improve their health and prevent their risk of disease or improve their symptomology of disease, and want to do that through exercise and nutrition, and then you get online or social media and Instagram or TikTok, and you see a bunch of people talking about autophagy and mitochondrial biogenesis, all of these things you cannot measure. Focusing on them does not make any sense. Well, this type of exercise has been shown to increase mitochondrial biogenesis, or this type of exercise has been shown to increase autophagy. Cool, that's great, but that's not reducing your A1C. That's not reducing your blood pressure. That's not improving your blood lipids. That's not reducing your C-reactive protein. If you're trying to improve your health, then you're actually trying to improve your health. So instead of looking at research or consuming content on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and podcasts, talking about this exercise increases autophagy, this exercise increases mitochondrial biogenesis, those studies most of the time are just showing that it had an effect on this cellular thing, that it had effect on this mechanism. That's not the same thing as an outcome. That's not the same thing as reducing your A1C, improving your blood lipids, reducing your blood pressure. That's not the same thing. So you should be looking at research or considering content that talks about this type of exercise has been shown to reduce A1C, improve blood glucose, improve blood pressure, decrease C-reactive protein, not some single mechanism in a cell. If you're someone who is trying to improve their health through training and like nutrition, and after some time your health improves, well, guess what? Autophagy, mitochondrial biogenesis, they were probably involved with that. But guess what? You didn't need to know or measure those things in order to improve your health. If you improved your health, you lost weight, your blood pressure got better, your blood glucose got better, guess what? You're healthier. If those things were involved, then they were involved. If they weren't, then whatever. Now, they probably were to some degree, but focusing on them and targeting them and highlighting them is not relevant. Focus on the things that you can measure, and measure the actual things that are going to affect your health and your goals.